Welcome back everyone to our second video in the Frog Microcontroller Trainer series. This is the second beginner lesson, even though it is called Project 3, because it's going to combine a couple of the concepts and components, specifically the buttons, or otherwise called a switch, and the serial monitor option of the microcontroller trainer. So again, I know it's a little confusing, even though it's lesson 2, it is going to be referenced as Project 3 on the website. So hopefully you were able to get through the first beginner lesson and get your trainer set up with the Arduino IDE platform. But I am going to basically start from scratch. In other words, I'm going to navigate to the locations of the items we'll be needing for today. So just a reminder, if you go to firstmakerspace.com, along the top you will see a tab called Resources. Once you click or hover over the Resources tab, you will go down to the Microcontroller Trainer Resource Hub, where you will find all the lessons and the project code that I'll be referencing in today's video. So again, I was at Resources, I hovered over that, and I scrolled down to the Microcontroller Trainer Resource Hub. And when I click on that, it takes me to the page, the hub for the microcontroller trainer. So specifically, I will be referencing these interactive projects. So again, just because it's lesson or video 2, it's actually going to be this Project 3 read input that we're going to be working through today together. Also a reminder, you do need to open your Arduino IDE platform. So you'll just launch that probably from your desktop. Unless you're using a Chromebook, it will be an extension. And then once I get my Arduino IDE platform open, if there's already something on the screen, say from the last time you were using it, go ahead and just go to File, New Sketch, and that will get you to a blank screen where you have basically a blank canvas, more or less, to start with, okay? Just a reminder also, you do need to find the Arduino Leonardo in the communication. Make sure you select the communication port, so you will see mine says Arduino Leonardo up there. And so you also, of course, need to make sure that your Frog trainer itself is plugged in both here and to your computer directly through the USB port. And you'll know it's powered on again because there's a red LED here that is illuminated. So I know that this guy is getting power right now. So I have now launched the Arduino IDE. I have selected the Arduino Leonardo as my port and the board I will be using, and that is what the Frog microcontroller trainer uses. And then I also have just a blank sketch ready to go for what I'm doing. So if I go back over to the resource tab here and go ahead and launch Project 3 read input. Again, I referenced that we're going to be looking at buttons today. Those are located here on your Frog microcontroller trainer. And specifically on the board, we call them switch 1 and switch 2. And again, on the board itself, we're looking right here and right here on our board. And you can press them, nothing's going to hurt. You can actually kind of hear them click a little bit. So switch 1 and switch 2. And again, nothing's happening because, of course, I haven't programmed my board to do anything yet. So not only are we going to be working with switch 1 and switch 2, we're also going to be using a function of the Arduino IDE platform called the serial monitor. And so when I'm in the Arduino IDE, I have this little icon up here on the top right of my screen that looks almost like a little magnifying glass. That will launch our serial monitor. So that's really the combination of things we're going to be looking at today. So going back to our lesson, it's going to tell you a little bit of the background and telling you, for example, there are 2 buttons on the Frog microcontroller trainer. That is switch 1 and switch 2 is what they are going to be referenced as on the board itself and in the code as well. So you'll see SW1 here, and it has been told that it's 1, and I'll get a little bit into why we call that a 1. You'll notice it pulls up the serial monitor, commands it to do something, and so while this is the entire code you'll be using and copying and pasting into your Arduino IDE, if you work through the project, it takes you through step by step, here's what we're doing and why are we doing it. I think really the only major background that we need to have is this conversation down here, why I'm telling it to do high or low or 1 or 0 and what all that means. So here we go. Think of this switch or button as 2 states. It's either in the state of not being pressed or in the state of being pressed. And so think of that as those are the only 2 options. Just like I only have the option of something being true or it being false, or I have the option of something being on or something being off. So when you look at it that way, know that when I assign a value of 1, that is, consider that true perhaps, or if I assign something a value of 0, consider that to be false. So I want you to kind of see it in that way. And so in our case, we're going to assign the 1, meaning high voltage, to the board. And what that translates to is the button is not being pressed. So when we pull up our serial monitor, we'll see that if we're not touching the button, we should be getting a constant readout of the value 1. And that is because we coded it to do just that. And so it understands that if the button is not being pressed, I then report a value of 1. That's what the board's going to do. Whereas the opposite is true. If I press the button, it's going to receive a low voltage, and therefore the value is going to be 0, or in the state of being pressed. And so you'll see once we get the entire code loaded and functioning with the board that that's exactly how it should behave. If the value is 1, then the board is not being touched, the button is not being pressed. If I am actively pressing and holding that button, then I should be getting a value of 0. So again, a value of 1 would be nothing's happening, or if I'm pressing that switch, it's going to be switch 1, then I should be getting 0 values if I'm actively pressing it. And then of course, if I press and release, I should see 1, 0, 1, 0, and it should react, or respond accordingly. So let's go ahead and, like I said, if you want to go into each more of the information in a little bit more detail on the project, it is there for you. But let's go ahead and copy that code. And reminder that you just do that by hitting that teal copy that comes up on your screen. Just gonna get this frog out of the way a little bit more for the time being. So we go ahead and hit that copy, and it will tell you it copied to your clipboard. And then you just want to minimize that window and go back to your Arduino IDE blank sketch. And just as a reminder, it does, a blank sketch, also include some information already on your screen. You're either just going to paste right over that, or if you would feel more comfortable, you can highlight and just delete what's already there. You truly want a blank canvas for the way that the code is written. So when you copied it, you'll see most of what I just deleted comes back up. So I'm going to then paste the text that I copied. So you'll see where I have SW1 standing for switch 1. You'll see I have what the inputs mean. You will also see that I command it to use the serial monitor. If all things are well, we'll go ahead and hit this check in the top left. Hopefully it doesn't throw me any errors if I've done things correctly. And sure enough, I don't get any errors at this point. So from there, we want to go ahead and select that arrow that's going to say to upload to the board. And just a reminder, and I'll switch back to the board here in a moment. Just a reminder, you'll know that the board is uploading because one of the little yellow LEDs starts blinking, indicating that it's receiving some communication. So again, now that I have checked my sketch to verify that there's no errors, I will then tell it to upload. And again, I'm going to just transition back because you'll see on the little frog itself, the little yellow LED should illuminate and start blinking once it starts receiving my code. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it to upload. We're going to look for this little yellow light up here to start blinking, and you can see it's doing so now. Great. And on my screen, and the frog is over it, so I'll move. Notice it says done uploading, or at least it did before it disappeared. And so it has successfully uploaded to the board. And now, this is the amazing part. If I wanted to hit switch 1, you'll notice nothing's happening on the frog itself, nothing's happening on my screen, and that's because I haven't opened that serial monitor. So again, this little area up here on the top right that kind of looks like a magnifying glass, I want to go ahead and hit that button to open my serial monitor. And as you'll recall from our previous little introduction, that if I am not pressing the button, I should be getting a value of 1. And sure enough, if you look at the serial monitor, you just keep hearing the state of the button is 1, which is not pressed. And sure enough, I'm not pressing the button switch 1. Whereas if I go ahead and bring the frog back up here, and you're looking at a bunch of 1s on the screen, if I press and hold this button, switch number 1, you'll see that I start getting 0 values on my screen. If everything has gone correctly, notice that the button is in a state of being pressed. So it's 0. If I let go, it should go back to 1. Sure enough. And so if I, again, would press and release a few times, you'll see it switches back forth from the 1 value to the 0 value, reacting to me pressing and releasing that button. So it's a very straightforward, simple lesson, but just remember we're learning how the components of the board work and learning some of the basic programming that you can do. And you just learned what the serial monitor does today. So I understand it may not have been a very in-depth lesson, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't a lot of value that was in this lesson. So again, just a reminder, we talked about buttons, which in this case of the Frog microcontroller trainer are called switches, specifically switch 1 or SW1. We didn't use switch 2 today, but it's there. You may use it in future lessons. And we learned how to program the serial monitor so that it responded to the state of the button or switch being pressed or not pressed. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll see you back here for lesson number 3.